let's do the introduction first, Alif. If you can give us a quick introduction of yourself, then I'll do the same.
Okay, hello everyone. First of all, thank you for the invitation. Happy to meet new people. I'm Elif, I'm from Romania and currently working as a DevOps engineer for WordPay, soon to change jobs. Also pursued the Red Hat path, started about 2.5 years ago. It was quite challenging and happy to enjoy the outcomes and continuously explore the ecosystem. Very briefly.
Hey, Mihai Kiveti. I run a small data center when usually the weather is right in my home living room here. Although due to recent developments and especially with the lockdown, I've been informed that's no longer on the list of approved items I'm allowed to have in the house. So I had to move to cloud. I've been asked to do a lift and shift of my servers to a shipping container and start to adopt these cloud-native technologies, which is kind of fortunate as this happens to be my day job. So I'm an STSM and CTO working at IBM on OpenShift solutioning. I'm responsible for clients in EMEA, so Europe, Latin America, and Canada. During my day job, I work a lot with OpenShift and solution architecture, but really my hobby is Linux. My passion is Linux, and I enjoy the ecosystem and the community. So very grateful for the opportunity to join up and do a couple of sessions here. Very happy to see a couple of familiar names. So Anton, nice to see you here. I see you at every single event and community initiative in Ireland. So happy to meet you here as well. And we're gonna play a story. We're gonna play a story today. So I met Elif a couple of months ago as she basically congratulated me on my recent RHCA. I see she was a RHCA, and we decided to work together on some community contributions, open source projects, and other initiatives as basically personal projects. And one thing came to mind was how do developers work together, especially during remote situations in, let's say, lockdown. And I'll leave this for Elif to give us an introduction of the topic we'll play today, and maybe we'll make it interactive and exciting for you. So, Elif.
Thank you, Mihai. Let me start by sharing my screen. Okay. Again, another common question in remote work and remote world. Does anyone see my screen? Because I'm not quite familiar with BlueJeans.
Yep. Maybe try F5 if you can press F5. Let's see if that does anything. If not, we'll try F11. Let's try both of those keys, just to make it full screen.
Okay. I think that is better.
If you can press F5, Elif, not sure if that works.
Okay.
On.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
That was not. That's weird. Anyways, let's start with the story. That would be the most interesting part. Today's presentation, as Mihai has already started, will be about a story, how to build an end-to-end container. But before getting our hands dirty, let me do a quick introduction about what Podman, Skopeo, Buildah, and are, how to use them, what are the advantages, disadvantages, and what these tools bring to us. And this will be that I will skip this and come to this a bit later as soon as we start the demo session. I'll be a bit mean, I'll let you guys be a bit curious. So, what is Podman? Podman, as you all may know, Docker has brought us a lot of advantages, and it is already widely used. It is capable of building everything related to containers, storage, network execution, and so on, and everything is managed by the same servers, which can bring also some disadvantages. This is why Red Hat has decided to develop its own tool without relying on the service. And this is the main difference between Docker and Podman. Podman does not need a daemon to work with. And also, thanks to its modular architecture, it is not necessary to run Podman containers as root. This also brings another advantage because containers can be run with different users having different privileges and without having the risks by someone else being able to access the container service and containers or running containers as the root users. And how does that work? In the user's home directory, all the information is stored there. All the information for the images and containers is stored there. For example, if you do a Podman image with your non-root user, it will only show images that certain user has created. And, well, I'm not sure if I can already show this. Yeah, I would need to quit the presentation, so I'll show this a bit later. Another advantage Podman would bring is the separation of UIDs using namespaces. This would bring an additional isolation layer when running containers. And although Podman is able to build images very similar to Docker with the Podman build command, Red Hat team also offers another tool called Buildah. And this is used for building OCI compliant container images. Buildah is closely tied to Podman. Among its features, this allows a user to manipulate an image or a running container to create new images, build the root directory of a container for its handling, or create new images.
With the CNC organization, and we've got some portfolio changes there around cloud packs, which frankly reduce the overlap.
Craig, you're on mute. You're talking, not on mute. Sorry.
Sorry, I suddenly found myself in work again.
No.
So he's definitely joining to some call of ours. So good job, Craig.
Sorry to call you out so explicitly, but it seemed like an urgent stop. So yeah, go ahead.
Hey, sorry about that, Alif.
No worries. Quite unexpected, but nice. Anyways, in case anyone would have a comment, please feel free to jump in anytime. I think that would be really nice to discuss various questions or various observations along the way, rather than having a certain time dedicated just for Q&A. So I do encourage and invite anyone to say anything at any moment.
We'll get to play with some of these tools as well. So one of the things that we'll look at, for example, is how Buildah is a bit different than using Docker build or Podman build, a bit hands-on during the demo session as well. So I'm, as Elif is getting the images ready for me in her section of the presentation, I'm doing some just-in-time development here. So Elif, do take your time.
Thank you, Mihai. Okay, that would be mainly about a quick summary about Buildah. Okay, next in line would be Skopeo. This is a tool for moving container images between different types of container registries. It also allows you to copy images between container registries such as Docker, QA, or also internal container registry. What is more interesting is that you don't need to pull the image locally to be able to push it again.
It's definitely another sound issue there. That's a good stop, though, because I do want to get Murph or maybe Ronan and some of the Irish guys to help me understand how to properly pronounce Quay. Quay, Key. Murph,
We
what
can
do you
spend
think?
we can spend the next hour on this if you want. Murph has a different opinion than Ronan. I can tell you that already.
I think it's funny that you called out Murph as one of the Irish guys.
I could tell you how the product guys pronounce it, but then we're in a GIF situation. There is no moral authority. Pronounce it the way you want to pronounce it.
You know, I've heard GitHub pronounced as GIFhub.
There you go.
So with that interruption, back to you, Elif. Sorry again.
GitHub? Really? Okay, I got lost to that point. I hope I no longer have any sound issues. Hopefully. Okay, so was discussing about Skopeo. That would be mainly about Skopeo. I don't think there would be anything else in particular, any advantage to be mentioned for the moment. The interesting part should come soon. Okay. Some words about the Red Hat Software Collections Library, Red Hat Container Catalog, and QA. It's no longer necessary to mention it. It's already a public or private container repository, which we are going to use in our demo really soon. About Red Hat Software Collections, this is intended for Red Hat customers to be able to use the latest stable versions of dynamic languages and open source databases. It is available to all Red Hat Enterprise Linux subscribers. The container catalog also contains certified and curated images built on top of Red Hat Enterprise Linux. Okay, UBI, well, we are going to use it. I'm going to skip this part, actually. Do you agree, Mihai, with that?
Well, I was thinking here, why can't we just use a insecure image from Docker Hub and just use, one of those? So let's see if someone from the audience has a bit of experience on building container images in terms of securing their pipeline, for example. So sourcing and understanding where your image comes from tends to be a very, very important topic. Are there any thoughts or suggestions, or how have you seen this done, for example, in your clients or in your day-to-day work? Dead silence. I'm going to start calling people out if that doesn't work. So let's start with somebody we know. I know Craig is listening on another call, so I'm not going to do that. Maybe Anton or Ronan. When you work with a bank or with a larger client, do you typically see them have some kind of restrictions on where they source their images, the life cycle, the support they get for those images, using private versus public registries?
I'm going to come off mute and see is Anton there, and if not, cool. Because yes, yeah, absolutely, right. So certainly in financial services sector, it's not a free for all and grab an image from wherever you'd like. They're often pulled from private repositories actually, where they have a good sense of what's included and how it's gotten there in the first instance. Well, I think you're on mute now, Mihai.
Yeah, but look how well I can gesticulate. Yeah, I was thinking as well, if coming in from the financial services sector, this is one of the biggest challenges. How do we ensure, let's say, that the images that we use, the source of those images, come from a secure place and they're updated and maintained at the same level that we expect for the images. So definitely happy to hear you talk about the use of UBI as well. So back to you.
Okay, that is a fair point, because from a financial sector perspective, it is quite troublesome to explain top management and architects and everyone else about security issues and being inquired about such issues. I think UBI kind of comes in help and really solves that problems, and it's been quite nice to use this, at least from my personal perspective and personal experience. Let me start with a bit of history. UBIs, Universal Basic Images, have been officially announced at the Red Hat Summit about 1.5 years ago. These are OCI compliant container-based operating system images with complementary runtime languages and packages that are freely redistributable. Unlike previous base images, these are actually built from portions of RHEL, and one can obtain them from the Red Hat Container Catalog. Moreover, these are designed to be a foundation for cloud-native and web applications use cases developed for containers. So also these are maintained and they're kind of, in short, these are guaranteed by Red Hat to be secure. They are maintained, constantly updated, and so on. From a security perspective, that is kind of self-explanatory. Also, I'm not sure if the image is large enough for you to see, guys, but the main point of this is to demonstrate the health check of a container image. We'll soon play a bit with some images. And Mihai, would you add anything here?
Yeah, I think this is a very valuable feature that I've been using more and more lately. I used to be a big user of images from Docker Hub and also a maintainer of images from Docker Hub. And then I realized that I'm not a good maintainer of my images on Docker Hub. In fact, most of them are over a year old. Most of them have hundreds of security vulnerabilities. And those of you who've seen me speak at, Docker Hub Dublin or some of the other places, you'll always see me do a demo of our vulnerability inspector, right, where I show an image and then I show the number of vulnerabilities that our container registry finds in those images. That wasn't actually part of the initial demo. I was supposed to demo the image workflow, and then I see my image has 973 vulnerabilities because I forgot to update it. And I was like, oh, no, I actually meant to demo you that part. That's our vulnerability inspector. It's a really good feature that shows how vulnerable your images are. But on a more serious note, I struggle a lot with this issue whenever I end up building container images, that the source of my container images is either not updated or scanned for vulnerabilities. And I've had to do a rebuild of all of the images I was using based on universal base images from Red Hat, which maintain not only up-to-date versions of the image, but they also have this vulnerability inspection and image health in place. So at least for me, from an image lifecycle perspective, this is one of the coolest features of the UBI. Another feature which probably isn't present in that screenshot is the ability to see how the image is built. You're looking at the Docker file and the source code, which unfortunately isn't always as clear as you would like it to be when you're using, other public images. With UBI, you know exactly how the image is built as well. If you look at the packages and the Docker file in the screenshot, you'll be able to see exactly what goes in that image. And all of the images here are built to run on OpenShift, which means they're built to run as regular users, right? You no longer have images that are built with root. You have users that drop that privilege and default to a regular, 1001 user ID.
Okay, I was on mute. Thank you, Mihai. Okay, Podman Compose. In short, this is an alternative to Docker Compose. Why should I use that? Well, that is interesting. First of all, can run rootless. So this is an advantage I have been mentioning for a few times now, also for Podman, Skopeo, Buildah. The same applies for Podman Compose. There is no daemon required. It only depends on Podman, Python 3, and PyYML. Also, it can be used by developers to run single machine containerized stacks using single familiar YML files. When should not we use this? Well, for single machine development, a recommendation would be to use code-ready containers, and for multi-node clusters, the recommendation would be to check out either OpenShift, Kubernetes, or OKI-Developers. How to get it on macOS and Windows. So there are some links here. We will not go over these because it is, we are mainly Linux users, but just for a reference.
And you'll be able to find the material shared here in a GitHub repository at the end of the call. So if you hang around and don't drop, you'll get a very nice surprise at the end as well.
Okay, so I think in order to get the for the demonstration part, I will be using Fedora 33. I have already a server where I have installed Podman, Buildah, Skopeo, and everything else. For macOS and Windows, the reference about, you'll get references on how to use that. It is pretty straightforward to get it and start using it. Well, and I think I'll share now my terminal because it would be a bit more interesting. Are you able to see my terminal?
Yep.
That's great. And one more thing, is the text large enough? I'm not sure.
Yeah, looks good.
Okay, that's great. So, as mentioning before, we don't need root privileges to start using any of the tools we have described today. I'm logged in using my username, MSElif, and having the UID 1000. Also, what would be interesting is to discuss how UIDs are mapped inside the container. So for that to see, Podman. What is to be noticed here is that UID 0 is mapped to my current UID. UID 1 is mapped to 100,000. UID 2 would be mapped to 100,001, and so on. That would be the interesting part, and how UIDs are mapped. Also, configuring the registries part, by default, these are these would be the registries to be searched for a start. However, we could add a local registry configuration in the current directory. So for me, that would be, I have already, done that. So the registries to be searched for my user would be Quay, registry access, Red Hat, Docker, an insecure registry, and also, if necessary, we have the ability to add some blocked registries. And
I can tell the folks who work in financial services or corporate or already have that block in place, already have very, very strict rules in terms of what registries they allow and permit. So that's a very cool feature. I actually didn't know about registries block before you mentioned it the other day, so good to know.
Well, happy to mention it. I kind of owed you from at the start of the presentation because I skipped purposely a slide. This is the moment when we start the very interesting part and when we try to solve the use case. As Mihai was mentioning, our use case is to be able, I will start with developing a secure base image or two, and push them to the private registry, in our case, QA. Mihai will then take these images and do some magic on top of those. I will not spoil his surprise. Unless if you want to mention it, Mihai.
Oh, I'm going to show you resume-driven development in action, but we'll get there soon.
Okay, cool. Similarly to Docker commands, we are able to search for container images. For example, let me search for HTTPD. And there is quite a bunch of them. Or maybe you start using some filters. Oh, typo. By the way, I have just changed my keyboard, so if I'm typing really weirdly, apologies in advance, because my original keyboard is a mechanical one and everybody would have hated me for the noise it makes.
That's my fault. I'll take the responsibility for that. Elif, something you need to know about Elif. Just like most tech people, she's a, let's say, fan of the IBM Model M type keyboards, and she's got actually a Cherry MX Blue keyboard, which during calls sounds like an absolute machine gun. So I've asked her to go and buy the cheapest, lousiest membrane keyboard she can find. And the mushy feeling of typing on a brand new keyboard right before a big presentation is probably not helping here. So sorry about that, Elif, but I'll take the blame on this one.
No worries. It's kind of funny anyways, but wanted to apologize because it feels really weird to type on a really different keyboard, but I know my original one is very loud. Coming back to Podman, I have just found the official HTTP image from Docker. Okay, we have also Skopeo to inspect it, for example, without pulling it. Let's see some information about. So Skopeo is useful in order to get all information available. For example, the available tags in order to pull it, when what is created, Docker version, layers, environment, variables, and so on. For the demo part, I'm gonna search the UBI, an UBI image, and pull it. And I'm actually interested in UBI 8. Hopefully I don't already have it.
Just
Okay.
from a context perspective, since I'm going to be the end user, right? And unfortunately, I need to come with some requirements from our ops team, which is Elif in this case. And one of the key requirements is that I need to develop my image on top of a OpenShift compatible non-root image. And if you know anything about port 80 and privileged ports, you'll soon figure out that you won't be able to open images that are built with privileged ports if your image is set not to run as root. So that's what Elif is doing now. She's building she's looking at the images and trying to reproduce a build as a more secure image.
Indeed, and one of the images we're gonna in both cases we're gonna start with UBI 8. I have just pulled it. It was created 5 weeks ago. Okay, let's connect to this one and see how. It's similar to Docker? Any suggestions? Let's suppose I completely forgot the command or how to do it, or have no help based on previous Docker experience. Okay, let's see what options. The most suggestive one would be run. Let's name the container UBI, simply UBI 8. Let's start. This one is non-interactive mode. Okay, and we're gonna use Buildah. Okay, I think I had created it before. Let me choose another name.
That's always good. It means we practiced.
Yeah, I should have deleted them, but might have slipped this one. So I'm inside the container now. Let me just exit. Similarly for Docker, in order to see all the containers we have, we would use something like, instead of the Podman, we could have used Docker PS to see running containers, -A to see literally all of them. And this is the container I have previously created. Let me reattach to it and do some operations with that. Okay, in order to deliver this image to Mihai, let me update everything.
You know, this is one of the biggest debates in setting up a DevOps pipeline for container images. Do I go with the image that's rolled by the vendor, so the provider, the 5-week-old image, or do I update my own and recreate the image and build it and publish it on my internal registry? So I'm wondering, what is your experience, dear guest or listener or participant or active listener on the call? How do you handle your images? So any thoughts? Do you always do an update inside your container image, or do you just roll with the version that was provided from your container registry and put your middleware on top of that, and every time there's an update to that, you issue a new image?
I can speak to our company briefly. So I'm Steve Chopanos. I actually work out of Baltimore, Annapolis, Maryland, for 14 West. And one of my coworkers, Robert Evans, is our DevOps architect over here. So we have a variety of different initiatives around our container platforms, and we have a couple different teams that use slightly different workflows. But generally speaking, what we're trying to do is also standardize on leveraging the UBI into the development workflow for teams who build containers and then push them to our key.io container registry, tag them appropriately, and then from there we pull them into our ideally our OpenShift pipelines, which will orchestrate through Argo CD overall for the deployment of projects and the provisioning of resources, and then kicking off the pipeline tasks to deploy dev, UAT, and production environments. However, we still have some teams that still source containers through Docker, and we're improving our governance around ensuring that people update their own containers that they're building, their base containers that they're building off of, to ensure that they're up to spec for security needs. We used to use Artifactory in the past, but we're shifting all of our container storage workloads now to Key.io, mainly because it does the job better of including security scanning and also taking the security reports and feeding them back into the OpenShift platform. So a developer doesn't really have to do any additional work in that respect. Like if you're using an image and if you've built an image from your code based off some base image, let's say it's UBI or maybe otherwise, once it goes into Key.io, the mechanisms are in place for security scanning, which is really the biggest issue for us from my perspective, working in IT and providing a governance layer around our platform initiatives with OpenShift. We just want to make sure that we're not breaking any security rules or security policies, I should say, with our container deployments.
That's an interesting perspective, Steve. And to be perfectly honest, most of the customers I've been working with seem to have or struggle with kind of the same challenges around their ecosystem. And this is one of the directions I've seen, let's say, a vast majority of longer term, once things hit production, kind of develop into. So thank you for sharing that. So Elif, back to you.
A really interesting perspective, by the way. So I'm interested now to see what differences are from the container I started and the base one. So for that, similarly, that would be a Podman div. Okay, that's all. I would commit my changes.
I think this also shows maybe free versions or free ways of building container images, right? One, the non-reproducible interactive one that is being shown here, which is usually done just to test out something. The next level, which is where you use maybe a Docker file to create a reproducible build. And the third version, the builder version, where you use a different set of tools, which again, don't require root and let you build your images directly in a container registry, which could be a completely different approach. And I don't know, Steve, how you do it, for example, for your company, but we know that Quay can build it. Oh, go ahead.
Sure. Here's one interesting bit of insight. About a year ago, I thought that source to image would be the way we would do everything, where essentially a developer writes code for a service, and then that code is referenced from a repository and built into a container as part of the pipeline directly within OpenShift. So OpenShift probably leverages Podman locally to build the container as part of the pipeline. However, we discovered that it didn't really gain us that much benefit. What was more beneficial to us is that we could build and tag containers and put them into the registry first. So in our case now, we're trying to standardize around Key.io, because once it's in the registry, we can introspect it for security reasons and then have a better time line of the versions that have been built and a way to retrieve them if needed. Whereas if we rely purely on source to image, that makes the build part of the container a little too ephemeral and doesn't really save us really time or anything. For us, it was more beneficial to actually have a finished build of containers sitting in the registry available for us to pull from by tag basis, and the ability to utilize Key.io security scanning.
That's really cool. That's really cool. One thing I've seen or one thing is also just writing Docker files or writing the specifications or builder scripts, putting them onto a GitHub repository, and then Key picking them up or OpenShift picking them up and doing the build using Builder or some other tools where you actually don't even let developers build your container images, because maybe their version or maybe their toolchain is tainted, if you understand what I mean. So maybe you want to always have as an input 0 binaries, because if a developer is building your images, they're still touching the binary files. But if the only thing your developer is allowed to, the only communication mechanism for your developer to deliver something to production is through the single version control GitHub. And if they want a new image in your OpenShift in production, it needs to go into GitHub, Docker file, version control, approved change request, pull request, and then an image gets built. You also avoid the chance of somebody coming in and sneaking something into that binary, maybe from a compromised laptop. So that could be an also interesting perspective to consider. Oh, sorry about that, Elif. Back to you. I'm kind of cutting a lot into your presentation, so full apologies.
No worries,
I'll
but
just let you.
let me deliver the images to you. Or did my assignment change meanwhile? Almost finishing. I have just committed the changes I did on the base image, tagged it properly in order to be able to push it to QA. Podman login, I think I already have my credentials. Podman login to QA. So I have already the the credentials entered. It would have asked for a username and password. And the next step is pushing the image. So that is also and in about few seconds the image will be available for Mihai to use further. Similarly, due to time constraints, I'll just explain what the second one would have consisted of. Also starting from an UBI base image, would have installed an HTTP server, enabled port 8080 to be open, exposed it, and also committed the changes and made the new image available to QA. Either similarly as we did now, or using a Docker file, which I can really quickly show you. So that would be the Docker file, similarly to the process of doing in the command line. Building it with Podman, similar process as done with Docker, tagging, and pushing to QA. I will not go through this, it will take a few minutes, but would like to give Mihai 3 more minutes because time is running really quickly. I think you're on mute, Mihai.
Hey, thank you, Elif. I'm good at talking, but when I have to do the work, well. Okay, so are you able to see my screen at the moment? You should be able to see a blue screen. I'm hoping you're able to see a blue screen.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet, Mihai.
Okay. Are you able to see it now?
Nope.
That's very, very strange. Hold on. So, share screen. Screen 2. Okay, that's very interesting. I'm not going to be able to do it like this, am I? Hold on. Just 1 second there. This must be one of those fancy Linux features. I've never actually used BlueJeans to share my screen before, but well, okay. So, Elif, you're using Fedora. Why doesn't it work for me? So I'm going to guide you through the demo I'm going to give Elif, and I'm going to ask you to do the steps for me. Unfortunately, as you swear, at this development team who's too incompetent to share their screen and figure out how to use Linux properly.
And I was happy to start using my original keyboard. I was actually changing them. Not sure if you can see that. Oh.
Okay. So I'm going to guide you to what's going to happen in the next steps. What's going to happen in the next steps is I'm going to show you how, and Elif, if you can share your screen for me there. I do apologize. Or maybe I need permissions. Let me just check. Florian, is this something that you need to give me in order to be able to screen share?
No, usually you should be fine.
I should be fine.
Usually it's a problem between Wayland versus Xorg. So if you're using either, you should just switch, log out, switch, come back, and then you can.
Yeah, I'm using Wayland. I was almost ready to say Wayland, but I'm not gonna reset my workspace now because that's gonna take me about 20 minutes. So if you can go to the command line, and you'll find a script in our GitHub repository under sources, which is called builder.sh. So it's gonna be in src in our GitHub repo. And I'm going to show you a different way to build images using, let's say, command line tools, which should be a lot more familiar to folks. So under src, you'll find, up to date. I've been lazy.
It's a habit of mine. I always ensure everything is up to date. I decreased the text size. Is it fine, or should I increase it back?
It's fine. If you can open builder.sh, we'll be able to take a look at what's going on. I'm kind of disappointed because I had an OpenShift environment going here. So here we go. We're still gonna make this entertaining. So what is happening here is a new tool which is called Builder, which builds containers just using command line shell scripts. Is building a container starting from Elif's image. And Elif's image is a Apache HTTP server that runs as a regular user, exposes port 8080, is actually built to support source to image as well. And we're installing Pandoc. And what you'll see here is a meta presentation. So a lot of you will ask, hey, where's the presentation, Elif? Where's the presentation, Mihai? The presentation is written in Markdown, and it generates PDF and PowerPoint documents. And it's built on OpenShift. So OpenShift will pick up, using source to image, a container image that contains Pandoc and LaTeX, which are used to build this presentation. They will run a build, and they will publish it using the Apache server that Elif installed. So you can now collect the presentation and have the notes from the meeting. And this is available on GitHub as well, so if you want to play with it, or if you're wondering, how can I stop using PowerPoint today? And also, how can I stop writing LaTeX and get back to real work? Here's how you can write presentations in Markdown like we did. So here's the idea. The first step that you see there is assigning a variable called container, which is my container ID. Basically says from key kubetalks HTTPD. That's the image that Elif has pushed. And then it's going to install make and git, because the repository that hosts our presentation has a make file. You type make, it builds a PDF. Sorry, it builds a PowerPoint. You type make transformation equals PDF, uses LaTeX to build a PDF. And then it's going to download Pandoc, which is a transformation tool that takes Markdown input and generates the output. It's going to copy it. It's going to config again to start Apache, and then it's going to commit the image back as Pandoc. And then it's going to take a look at it and inspect it. So if you can run a build, in fact, I have uncommitted changes. Whoopsie. So if you can exit and do a git pull, let me, and if you do a git pull in 3 seconds, 2 seconds, 1 second, there we go, just in time development here, and then run again builder sh, it will build this Pandoc image, and you'll actually be able to access the documentation on a OpenShift cluster. So, apology.
1 second, please.
So, for all intents and purposes, what is happening here is basically OpenShift is able to take that image. It's going to create a build of that image. The build of that image will fetch the kubetox secure continuous delivery with Podman GitHub repository where our Markdown files reside. It's going to run, in this case, Pandoc or LaTeX to build the presentation, and it's actually going to serve the presentation. Now, for reasons of hiding the presentation, it's hidden behind here as /kubetox.powerpoint or PDF, and in order to access it, basically you're going to need to go to your topology, to your application topology, and then as you can see, this application is running on one pod, and you take a look at the logs, and you're going to find the name of the file which you built. Another option is to go to the console of your application, so you can remote shell into this presentation, and you're just going to type an ls in this pod, because this pod is basically in var ww HTML, and as you can see, Superpan effects kubetox build PowerPoint example is over there. Did any of that make sense to any of you?
The last part was a bit difficult to see with your camera, but
the risks and joys of switching to a new conference software in Linux. What can I say?
no worries.
But thank you, Olive, for supplementing that effort and helping me figure this out last minute there. So, by the way, if you look at Olive's screen right now, it generated an image and it has Pandoc 292 inside the image. So it was just running the image there. So if you do a Podman run, you'll be able to use this image. All the material and all the collateral is available on Git. So we'll share that with you. 1 second, github.com, kubetox, and 1 second, and I'm gonna paste that in the chat. So let's leave the last 3 minutes for questions, answers, or general interaction. Thoughts?
So I don't have any questions particularly, but so Steve went through one way of how they are managing their pipeline, and you described another way earlier. Is there maybe a third way that you would see as being acceptable and secure, and how to manage the build process? Or are those really the two recommended ways where you would see they get your stamp of approval?
From my experience, it's ideal to treat containers or Podman or Docker or OpenShift or Kubernetes as code, as they should be. And if I were developing Java or Python or any other software, right, I would normally ensure that I'm using continuous integration where developers do check-ins every day into a shared version control repository. I would set up testing, for example. I would set up static analysis, SonarQube, and I would use SonarQube to do analysis of my, let's say, Docker files, right? And then I would be able to set up testing of my deployment and so on. Well, any approach that sets up such a continuous delivery pipeline for containers is going to be a successful approach. The more you can automate and the more you can ensure there are quality gates between the various steps of your pipeline, the easier it is going to be for you to develop a secure, trusted process. You might have rock stars who are developing your containers, but they will get bored easily. They will stop maintaining your code, or their changes will be on their laptops or their machines or their devices. And that's not a good approach. So if I were to give one advice to folks is standardize on a container registry. So if you're using Key, make sure you use all of the features and sign your containers, and you're using the inspection capabilities, and you're using the static analysis capabilities of Quay and Clair and all the other tools. And make sure that you're version controlling and really using the review features in GitHub or GitLab or whatever you're using. So, pull requests, comments, make sure that process is tight. If a developer can deliver a container image in production by doing a push of the binary, then your process is probably leaky.